Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Monday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. I'm Paul Dottino, he's Matt Citak, and we'll be here for the next hour to talk New York Giants football with you. Our phone number is 201-939-4513, 201-939-4513. You can also find us, of course, on the New York Giants YouTube page, as well as the Giants mobile app, and leave some of your thoughts, questions, and comments there as well. Or you can go back to X and hit us up at #GiantsChat. An archive of this show and our entire podcast network is available on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at giants.com/podcasts. And as always, we come to you from the Giants podcast studio, presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. Well, Combine Week is finally over. Yep. A lot of testing, a lot of drills, a lot of interviews. A lot of stuff going on out there in Indianapolis. Nothing earth-shattering, okay? There was a lot that went on that, quite frankly, we expected and was par for the course. And then again, there were maybe a few little tiny twists and turns that maybe raised a few eyebrows. Now, John Schmelk and I not only spent the whole week of BBK talking about this stuff, we also were on WFAN with the Giants Combine Special on Saturday. We've pretty much exhausted most of what we had to say. Matt has not been on. I will just say this, Matt. The one item that I do want to add, because it's kind of an extension from what we said on Saturday Night Show, is that when you looked at each of the position groups, they all broke records as position groups for their 40-yard dash times. And I get it, right? We say that today's athletes are bigger, stronger, faster. They're more specialized in their training, and especially when they're getting ready for the Underwear Olympics, which is another word for the Combine. So I guess it's not a total shock. And then part of the reason also is that some of the high-profile guys opted out of the 40-yard dash. And then some of the guys who we knew who were going to be great, they ran the 40-yard dash and ran great. So that also had a little bit of an impact on some of the numbers. But every position group, at least according to the graphic that I saw from NFL Network, every position group set an all-time combine record for their combined average 40-yard dash. That was one thing that really developed over the course of the last day and a half since we were on Saturday, because there were still position groups that had not finished. And I just think that, there's such an emphasis on speed today. Everything is about speed, 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 speed. You can't teach fast, right? That's what they always say. But yet these speed coaches somehow do find a way to teach a little bit of speed. That was the one obvious takeaway from this combine. But I wanted to get some of yours since you didn't have an opportunity to talk to us over the week.
Yeah, so that was going to be my number one takeaway.
Was it?
I'm sorry. No, it's all good. We're thinking alike, which I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but
it all depends on your perspective.
But yeah, this was the fastest combine performance we've ever seen from a draft class. And as you mentioned, you go down the list of positions. Each position had at least one guy that, either set the all-time combine record for 40-yard dash or ranked in the top 3 all time at the position. The wide receivers, I thought the one wide receiver who on the other end of the spectrum maybe kind of hurt himself with his 40 time, Carnell Tate, who obviously is a popular pick being connected to the Giants in mock drafts at number 5. He still is one of the top, I would say, 2 wide receivers in this draft. I think going into Indy, there were 3 guys in that conversation, but due to apparently some of his interviews and then one of what was the most bizarre combine podium sessions I have ever seen, I think Mekhi Lemon has dropped himself below the other 2 guys in terms of the top wide receivers in this draft. So I still think between Carnell Tate and Jordan Tyson, those are going to be the first 2 receivers off the board. But Carnell Tate, as good as he was at Ohio State, as big as he is, his 40 time was a little slower than I think people were kind of hoping he would get. Now, personally, it doesn't worry me or concern me at all. I mean, I think his final time was like a 4.49 or around 4.50. I'm sure when he runs at the Ohio State Pro Day in a couple weeks, I'm sure he'll improve on that, because somehow on these school pro days, everyone's 40 time somehow improves from the official time at the combine. But he's still a top 10 pick. I don't think his 40 time is going to hurt his draft status too much.
To just let you finish on him, he was a 4.53, which put him in the 35th percentile for the receivers.
I thought that was his first run.
Okay.
I thought he had a second run that was a little bit faster. If I'm not mistaken.
I'm not seeing it, but okay, maybe he did. But I know he was definitely in the 4.5s.
Okay.
And then in the split, he was in the 17th percentile in the 10-yard split.
Now, it did look like he kind of somewhat stumbled out of the gate. He got off to a little bit of a slow start, which obviously ended up hurting his total time. But at the end of the day, I don't think it really matters. He's still going to be a top 10 pick, and I still think he's going to be a very good NFL wide receiver. But
you know what I want to know? I want to know, what does his GPS say? Now, here's why, and I don't know if you caught this. Malachi Fields from Notre Dame, who I would love to see the Giants get a little bit later on in the draft. In fact, I'm hoping he slips to the 4th round and they can get him there. Okay? He ran a 4.61, which apparently just dropped jaws at the combine. Like, oh my goodness, no. What, did he have a piano on his back? Yet, the GPS devices that he wears during the games clock him at over 22 miles an hour. So, you see, what I'd like to know is, somebody get me the GPS devices on Carnell Tate. What was his game speed? If they tell me he's 22 plus miles an hour in games, you know what you can do with this 40 time.
I mean, you could do that anyway.
I know, but I'd like to have the GPS numbers so I can prove it to anybody who scoffs at his 40 time, because they're going to say, well, I have the numbers. I'd like to say, I got the GPS numbers too. This is what you can do with that 40 time. But anyway, because I'm a big Fields guy, and I would prefer not to let the 4.61 scare me. But if it's going to scare other teams and leave him into the top of the 4th round for the Giants, that'd be great. Okay? But I know this. His GPS was over 22 miles per hour. I've watched the tape. I've watched him play games. And he runs fine. Yeah. Anyway, please finish.
No, I mean, you're definitely right with everything you just said. I mean, these 40 times, they don't actually really mean anything, because there never once will any NFL team need any of these players to run 40 straight yards in their underwear. So, these numbers really don't mean much. Carnell Tate showed what he can do with his production at Ohio State the past 2 years. So, again, this 40 time, it does not bother me at all. I think he would still be firmly in play for the Giants at 5, depending on what they do at wide receiver and free agency. Mm-hmm. There was a mock draft that came out this morning from Pro Football Focus, Trevor Sikkema, who had Carnell Tate going to the Giants at 5. So
did he?
He did. So I don't think it's going to really hurt Carnell Tate too much. It was somewhat noteworthy because, as you mentioned, a lot of the top guys don't even do anything at the combine. Carnell Tate chose to at least run the 40, wasn't as good as he was hoping, and then he didn't really do anything else, which was somewhat of an interesting decision. But maybe he just decided, I'm going to pack it in and wait till the Ohio State Pro Day and then show what I can do there. But on the other end of things, in terms of guys that crushed it, at least in the 40-yard dash, well, in more than just the 40-yard dash, but I want to just quickly talk about the 2 top tight ends in this draft, because they both put up historic combine performances. And I'm talking about Kenyon Sadiq of Oregon, who set the new combine record for tight ends with his 40-yard dash, which, if you look at some of the comparisons of guys that he ran faster than at other positions from the last 10 years,
it's nuts.
It's insane for a guy his size. And then the other one, which of course I'm sure you could have predicted I would have to bring this guy up.
Oh, I know. Go ahead.
Eli Stowers, my man, who I've been hyping up for 6 months now, set the new combine record for tight ends in the vertical jump, which he jumped over 45 inches, which is insane, and the broad jump. And he had the tied for the second fastest 40 time of any tight end as well. So those are I think pretty clearly now you're tight end 1 and tight end 2. And I will say, as much as I love Eli, Citak is probably tight end 1.
Yes.
But Stowers, I think it would be an early day 2 pick. Depending on what the Giants do at 5, if they decide to go defense at 5, which obviously right now is definitely in play, whether it's Sonny Styles, Caleb Downs, name your Ohio State defender, whatever. But then day 2, whether it's 37 or if the Giants move around the board a little bit, Eli Stowers would be a great offensive playmaker to add to this offense with, Daniel Bellinger obviously entering free agency. Chris Manhertz is going to be a free agent. Theo Johnson is the only tight end, and Thomas Fidone is on the roster as well, but obviously Fidone didn't really do much this past year. Theo is the only tight end that had any production for the Giants this past season who is set to return. I certainly would not mind if the Giants went out and added a very, very athletic tight end that can catch the ball. Drops were not an issue for him, really, at Vanderbilt. He is one of the top tight ends. He's one of the top athletes in this entire draft. I just think day 2, that would be an interesting selection to add him if they go defense in round 1.
I understand. I think you're letting your old college alma mater get in the way of your judgment, but that's okay.
In what way? He's an early day 2 pick.
Oh, he's a legitimate
he's
player.
Tight end too.
He's a legitimate player. I just think that the Giants have other things with round 2 that they've got to go for. They've got to consider, for me, a cornerback. They've got to consider potentially an offensive lineman. They've got to consider potentially, I would think a wide receiver potentially.
Well, I'm under the impression that most, if not all, of those positions will be addressed in free agency.
Oh,
assuming that happens,
okay,
then I would go. Obviously, if the Giants do not, if Wan'Dale Robinson leaves, which is obviously could happen, and the Giants don't add another top level wide receiver, starting level wide receiver to line up opposite Malik Neighbors, then of course wide receiver is a bigger need than adding another tight end.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously we'll see what happens. Free agency, the negotiating period starts in a week. So we'll start to get some answers as soon as next week. But I could see the Giants adding a veteran in free agency to start alongside Malik. And then, in which case, and also Eli Stowers could easily line up at wide receiver. He's a tight end for sure. And he's definitely not known for his blocking, I'll say. Now, I've seen interviews where he is putting an emphasis on his blocking this offseason because obviously he understands tight end in the NFL, you need to block.
Mm-hmm.
Very few tight ends have successful NFL careers without successfully learning how to block. But it would just be a very interesting and different addition for a playmaker to this offense, assuming wide receiver is addressed earlier.
I'm not interested in any tight ends, to be honest with you. I'm big on Fidone, and I'm bringing back Bellinger. And you know what? If it means they're going to keep 4 tight ends, I'm bringing back the blocker in Manhertz. I'd be fine just running it back the way it is. I got too many other holes I got to deal with if I'm sitting in that chair. But I'm not disputing your player.
I just think the Giants are in a position now. Obviously, some needs, like roster holes, will need to be addressed in free agency starting next week. But as we talk about every year, when you get to the draft, the goal, which doesn't always happen like this, but the goal is just to be able to draft the best player available, the best guy that, regardless of position, that will just make your team better from day one.
Mm-hmm.
I personally think Eli Stowers would do that.
Okay.
And I will admit that clearly I have some bias when I say that.
And that's okay.
I can admit that.
I just want to make sure the people out there who are new to the show know he's a Vanderbilt guy. So.
I just think he's going to be very, very good and would love for it to happen.
Okay.
With Big Blue, as opposed to...
I have nothing against the player or his ability. I absolutely believe that he's going to do fine in this league, and he'd be a good pick for somebody. I don't think he fits the roster.
I went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but my overall point was just being that this is a very athletic and strong tight end class between Citak and Stowers at the top, but then you have Max Clare, who will be probably a later day 2 pick from Ohio State. I forgot the guy's name, but the Stanford tight end who excelled this past weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one other guy, not John Michael Schmidt. Let me pull it up real quick. John Michael Gillenborg from Wyoming, who also had a great, very athletic performance in Indianapolis this past weekend. So my overall point was just being, this looks like it could be a very athletic and strong tight end class. And depending on what the Giants do earlier in the offseason leading up to the draft, adding one at some point, even if it's not my boy in the second round, adding one at some point could end up turning into some good value for the Giants.
I have other priorities. That's all. And then that's fine.
That's fair.
That's why neither one of us are sitting upstairs with Joe.
That is very true.
Did you have another item that you wanted to throw out about
I guess the only other one, which is not a surprise because we knew this going into it, but our friend upstairs, Dan Salomon, must be very happy with
that guy.
The overall performance from Ohio State.
Oh,
because
my goodness.
If there was any doubt that there would be 4 top 10 picks from Ohio State, I think that was put to rest this past weekend. The only one, maybe now, Carnell Tate because of this 40 time. But as I said before, I don't think it's going to really hurt him much because he has the production on tape from Ohio State this past year that shows that whatever time he got clocked at running the 40 doesn't really matter much because he was still one of the most productive receivers in the NFL. But you look at the 3 defensive players between Reese, Downs, and the most impressive one, Sonny Styles, which I know you have his RAS score pulled up there. Wow. I mean, Sonny Styles in particular, I mean,
it's all green.
Literally, he got a perfect, the RAS score, which is, what is it, a relative athletic score. It is a score that's used to show prospects, basically their athleticism. And he got a perfect 10.0 out of 10.0.
Every single thing that he did was green.
Didn't he have the number
yellow,
one?
Well, he had a yellow originally on his 10-yard split. When John and I were doing the show on WFAN on Saturday, he was yellow, which meant good on his 10-yard split, and he graded at 9.99. And they said he was the 4th highest linebacker ever in RAS score. But then that changed. When I looked at it this morning, it became all green and 10.0.
The thing that I saw was that he had the number 1 athletic score of any tight end, of any linebacker since they started tracking this, however many years
Well, now
ago.
that they changed that one item to green, yes.
Over 2,000 linebackers.
Yeah, 2,300.
And he was literally number 1. No, right here. Ranked 1 out of 3,215 linebackers, going all the way back to 1987.
Okay.
The most athletic one.
The other day when we
so if there was any doubt that he was going to be a top 10 pick before, there's no doubt now. He's not making it to 10. He may not even make it to 5 at this point.
Maybe
which I know then you can go into the whole positional value argument of a linebacker, but just in terms of pure athlete and just pure football player, he clearly is one of the top 5 players in this draft, in my opinion.
So that's the deal with some of the items that we saw. Obviously, the other big headline item kind of from the testing was that Bain, the defensive end out of Miami, did measure in with very short arms, under 31 inches.
The T-Rex arms.
That's what they call them, right? That's the nickname they give to these guys who have shorter arms. I don't know. I mean, I talked to a scout who said he's better off as a 3-technique defensive tackle anyway. He should not be on the edge. So who knows? But that was another kind of bigger headline that did come out in terms of testing.
Yeah, that was day one.
Yes.
There's so much happened since then. I completely forgot about that. But yeah, no, you are right. Again, similar to the Carnell Tate 40 time. I mean, look at Ruben Bain's production in Miami. What he was able to do.
He's a football player.
Against
There's no doubt.
Any offensive lineman that was put in front of him, he dominated. Him having slightly short arms, I don't think it's going to matter. I think
it will matter how you use him. I think
I think his arms could be 4 inches longer, and it would still matter how the team uses
right.
him.
It always does.
Of course.
Deployment is very, very important for any of these players. I'm kind of interested in what the scout told me about making him a 3-technique, to be honest with you. I'm not so sure that I would want him on the edge because I don't know if that's going to maximize his potential. But we will see. 201-939-4513 is our phone number here on BBKL. One final note is that tomorrow is the closing down day for the tagging period here in the National Football League. And we know that Pickens, the wide receiver from the Cowboys, Pitts, the tight end from the Falcons, and it looks like more and more because the Jets have to spend a bunch of money because of the salary cap regulations and the minimum number of dollars that a team must spend, it does look like they may have to wind up tagging Breece Hall in some capacity.
Yeah, their general manager came out and said this past week in Indianapolis that whether it's the franchise tag or the transition tag, Breece Hall will get one of those tags. And I don't know if he definitively said will be a member of the Jets in 2026, because obviously you can put a tag on someone and then trade them, as we saw with Brian Burns only a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But he made it very clear that Breece Hall will not be just walking out the door with nothing coming back in return for the Jets.
Right.
He will be getting a tag one way or another. But it does seem like those are the only three players that will be receiving one of the two tags this offseason.
Yeah, it really does. And, I understand it. Okay, if you're the Giants, even your top three free agents, Illuminor and Flott, honestly, and Wandale Robinson, honestly, if you're the Giants and you look at those tag numbers, they're too rich.
Way too rich.
So
those tag numbers when they came out, which nothing was unexpected, but just some of those numbers were so high that it would not make any sense for the Giants, I don't think, to use one of those tags on one of those three players.
I don't think anybody thinks so, to be honest. So anyway, it is coming up tomorrow. The deadline for the tags does come up tomorrow. If there's anybody, okay, that you think, on the list, and Bellinger is a lesser name, and so is Dane Belton. But if there's somebody that you think that you would like to retain or like to put under the tag, where you have an opinion about those guys, by all means, give us a call. Again, 201-939-4513. Now, I lost the screen, so let's just go here to Donnie. You're first up on the program. Hello.
Gentlemen, happy Monday to you. How are you?
You too. How's it going?
How you doing, Donnie?
Can't complain. No snow this week, hopefully, here in the New York area.
Fingers crossed.
Listening to your opening salvo kind of ties right into what I was calling about. In terms of free agency and roster building, to me, a flawed approach is trying to fill needs and fill out a roster. You really have to build strength in the NFL. It's hard enough to hit on free agency and draft picks, trying to balance your roster out, saying, okay, I got a D tackle, now I need a quarter. I got a quarter, now I need a tight end. I got the tight end, now I need a wide receiver. To me, the Giants' focus should be attacking what they hope to be their strength, whether that's their offensive line, whether that's their defensive front, whether it's their secondary, wide receiver, whatever it is they want to do. I look back at the 07 and 11 championship, and if you go back and look, those teams had starters that nobody would say were players to write home about. Guys that were rotational players, guys like Michael Johnson, even Kawika Mitchell, Reggie Torber, solid role players, low, cheap contracts. They were lifted up by the rest of the team, the strengths that those teams had. 07, the running attack, the passing, and the pass rush. 11, the pass rush and the passing game. To me, that's the real way to handle this. So, personally, I hope they attack the front seven and the offensive line. And if it means they go into the season and they're still weak at the number 2 corner spot, they're maybe not feeling great about their safeties, so be it. Build an identity, and then you fill in the rest. At that point, you just need solid NFL caliber baseline players and then you hang your hat on your strength. So that's where I hope they go at. Appreciate the work you guys do throughout the offseason. I'll continue to listen. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Donnie.
Appreciate it very much. Thank you. 201-939-4513. Quick thought?
Yeah, well, I have good news for you, Donnie. If you go back and look at the last nearly 2 decades of what the Baltimore Ravens did under John Harbaugh, those teams were built in the trenches.
They sure were.
They dominated on both sides of the line of scrimmage up front. And so, obviously, we don't know exactly what John Harbaugh and Joe Shane's plan is for this offseason, for the identity of the 2026 team. But I'm pretty confident in saying it'll involve somewhat of building up front on both sides of the line. So I think, if you just look right now in terms of the offensive line, the Giants have 2 starting offensive line positions that need to be filled. The right side is all entering free agency between Illuminor and Greg Van Roten.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look at the defensive line, and obviously, as we've talked about for the last couple of years, finding that, guy to start and play significant snaps next to Dexter Lawrence on the interior is something that still probably needs to be addressed. I don't know if that guy currently is on that roster right now. So I do expect, whether it's through free agency, draft, both, I'm pretty confident in saying there will be some big boys added on both sides.
Yeah, it's quite clear that Harbaugh is about the trenches, and most smart football people are, so that shouldn't surprise you. We go to line 2. Andrew in North Carolina. You're next on the program. Hello.
Hey, guys. It's good to hear you all again.
Oh, thanks for calling.
Thanks, Andrew.
I had two things. To Matt's point with Cornell Tate, I was hearing a lot of GMs say they were really impressed. Some of them even clock him in as a 4-4 guy. And as you guys already said, it really doesn't make a difference. He'll still be top 10. But my curiosity was, I've never seen any mock draft or heard anybody want to draft Cornell to the Tennessee Titans at 4. And I know Robert Saleh is a defensive coach, and it's a great fit for a DN, but don't you got to get Cameron Ward, a number 1 receiver? I think Paul made a point a couple weeks ago how the Super Bowl reminded him of Drake May really needing a number 1 receiver. How come I'm not hearing anything about Tennessee potentially drafting one? I know free agency is still out there, and I'm hearing things about Dayball and Wandale reunion, but outside of that, that was my first point with Tennessee not going receiver. And 2, my dream scenario is Caleb Downs all the way, no question, and we can get receiver later. One receiver that I'm not quite hearing about is Jacoby Lane. I am in love with him out of USC. Big guy. I think he ran a good 4.4 at the combine. He's had production his 3 years at USC. Jackson Dart's first big throw was a deep ball to Humphreys, a big receiver. I just think he is a phenomenal receiver, and I wanted to know what you guys thought about Jacoby Lane and where you think he's going to fall to. I'm in love with him. That's my guy right there.
All right.
Downs all the way.
Appreciate the phone call. All right, let's take these things one at a time. First thing we noticed about the last 2 Super Bowls is that the trenches were not just important, they were decisive. So, yes, it is true that the Patriots could have used another weapon for Drake May. But the overwhelming takeaway from each of the last 2 Super Bowls is that the trenches determined by far more than any other position what was going to happen in that game. And the defensive lines ate up the other team's offensive lines in both of those 2 Super Bowls. That's just beyond debate. I mean, we can't even talk about that. It's just the fact. They destroyed them. They put them in a cheese grater and just shredded them. And so, it still comes back to football 101 for me. It's always going to be trenches first. Now, having said that, as we've discussed, the Giants do have to deal with free agency first. They also have to figure out if the new coaching staff, for example, what if the new coaching staff thinks that Darius Alexander in his second season is going to be a full-time starter? Well, now, maybe it's not as important to draft another DT. We don't know the answer to that. What if they think, and you guys know how I felt about Chauncey Golston. His season last year was basically a throwaway. He was hurt much of the year, and when he did play, he didn't play very much. Chauncey Golston, to me, is a run-stopping defensive end, / 3-technique defensive tackle. Maybe between Chauncey Golston and Darius Alexander, maybe the Giants feel that they can play somebody next to Dexter Lawrence, and maybe what they really need is a backup nose for Dexter Lawrence for when he comes out of the game, instead of drafting a 3-technique. Maybe they have 2 3-techniques on this roster right now. Maybe they do. I don't know what John Harbaugh and his staff thinks. So let me take care of your first point with that comment. As far as the second one, I have not looked at tape on Lane yet. I'm not that deep in. He is not presumed to be one of the lead receivers in the receiving group of draftees. So is he potentially somebody later? I'm aware of his height. He is a skyscraper. I'm very much aware of that. I'm aware of that he's been very productive. in my own back of my head, I've kind of attached myself to Malachi Fields of Notre Dame, but that does not mean that Lane would not be somebody that after I take a look at, I also feel would be a great consideration. The problem here is that if you're the Giants, and I'm on board with what Pat Kerwin said during our huddle this week, and if you get a chance, John and I talked to Pat Kerwin by remote from Indianapolis, and I asked him the specific question about how would you, given where the Giants are today, how would you prioritize the offense and the defense? Supplementing for Dart or adding to an underachieving defense? And I loved his answer. I've hashed it over. I've digested it. I've put it into my equations of everything else that I look at, and I think he was right. He said you draft first two rounds, you're drafting defense because there are players there who are going to have value and match your need. So you draft defense in the first and second round. You don't have a third-round pick because you traded it with Houston for Jackson Dart last year. When you get to the fourth round, now if you want to talk about getting there are guards. I happen to like Rutledge out of Georgia Tech, who I think could be an early fourth-round guard. He's nasty. He's mean. He's one of those guys as a junkyard dog. I would target him potentially early fourth. If you're going to go receiver, if Malachi Fields is still there early fourth, that's where I'm going to look. That's how I'm handicapping it right now from a bird's eye view. I got a lot of digging to do in the next 2 months, but that's how I would look at it. Downs in the first round. John is high on Chris Jackson. I'm with him. I like Chris Jackson as well. He had a great combine. He probably snuck into the bottom of the first round. We'll see. Okay, we will see. But I could absolutely see the Giants go safety and corner with their first two picks and then think about an offensive player in round 4. Anything you want to add?
Well, yeah, just going back to the caller's 2 points. First of all, I have seen Carnell Tate projected to the Titans at 4 in a 1 or 2 mock drafts. It's not, that's not something that I think is seen as like a, no chance at all that happens. I think obviously the Titans are in a similar situation. They're trying to build around Cam Ward, just like the Giants are trying to build around Jackson Dart. Brian Daboll's arrival as the offensive coordinator there, I'm sure he will be, pounding the table trying to get a wide receiver as the 4th pick in Tennessee. But I think you see more defensive players tied to the Titans at 4 because Robert Saleh is the head coach. And obviously his teams have always been built around having very strong defenses, and that Titans defense left a lot to be desired last year. So I think that's why you see more, edge rushers, Sonny Styles, those sort of guys connected to the Titans. But I have seen Carnell Tate in some projected to the Titans at 4. So it's not, it could happen that way. And then in terms of Jacoby Lane, I'll just say I also have to go into watch more of his USC film. But from everything I've read, he is being considered one of like the biggest winners from the combine this past weekend. Because as Paul briefly mentioned, he is 6'4", 200 pounds. He ran a 4.47. He had a great vertical jump. His athleticism was through the roof as he showed this past weekend. You combine that with his size, it's looking like he might have, played himself into being a day 2 pick if that wasn't already going to happen. It does look like now his projections are somewhere on day 2. Whether it's early day 2 or late day 2, that's a big difference, but it does seem like he will hear his name called sometime on day 2.
Daniel Jeremiah said there were 19 wide receivers who he had first 3-round grades on. Now, I did not hear the list of all the people that he put in that bucket. Is Lane one of the 19?
For sure.
Probably.
For sure.
I would think so. I don't know that.
He was not in Jeremiah's latest top 50 that came out before the combine last week. We'll see. I'm sure Jeremiah is going to update it within the next week. There's a chance he might have played himself in. But as you mentioned, and as Jeremiah himself has mentioned, there are a lot of wide receivers that deserve to be taken in the first 2 days of the draft. And because there's such a surplus, some of those guys are going to drop to day 3.
They will.
Just like we saw last year at the running back position.
Sure.
There's so many guys. Not every team's looking to draft at that position, so some guys are going to fall to the beginning of day 3. That is where the Giants might be able to, steal some great value of a wide receiver that, most years would be, maybe a late 2 early 3rd round pick might drop to the beginning of the 4th round just because there's so many of those guys available in this year's class.
Now, I will just say this. Kerwin's thought was, if you're in the Giants' position, yes, you draft defense the first 2 rounds, think about offense a little bit later, but he also said that in free agency, what he would try to do is get some help for Jackson Dart in free agency and go that way. Get some veterans who know what they're doing, who are experienced, who Dart can work with, Dart can learn from, knows that those guys aren't going to be rookies who are going to make rookie mistakes, so you don't have to worry about a learning curve. Everything that Kerwin said made sense, and if you guys know me at all, Pat Kerwin is aces to me. I'm a huge, huge fan, have been for a very, very long time. He knows his stuff. And so in looking at, let's just say, wide receiver, pending free agents, if I were Team X and looking for a reasonably priced wide receiver, I'm still thinking that Romeo Doubs might be a reasonably priced wide receiver if you're going to enter that market. I think Jalen Naylor from the Minnesota Vikings, personally, again, I think he's had injuries early in his career, had him in college, had him with the Vikings, but the last 2 years he's been much more healthy. He's got a terrific yards per catch. He can play slot. He can play boundary. And you know what? He was a 6th-round pick when he came out of Michigan State.
He's not going to cost you much.
I don't think so. And I think there's a lot of upside there. He's caught 10 touchdown passes over the last 2 seasons. That's not a fluke.
What about another name that I've seen floated around as a possibility for the Giants since the news of Matt Nagy being brought on as offensive coordinator came out? Tyquan Thornton from the Chiefs. That's obviously more of a deep vertical threat, but had some success with the Chiefs this past year, playing under Nagy, and obviously Mahomes and Andy Reid, of course, as well. But just another wide receiver free agent I've seen as floated as like a speculation possibility for the Giants.
So, there are some potential reasonably expensive, reasonable cost kind of guys who might be a little bit under the radar, who could actually flourish and maybe put up a lot bigger numbers than they have in the past. I mean, for example, Naylor, look who he's playing with. They got some weapons on that Minnesota Vikings team, so his numbers are depressed automatically. And quite frankly, the quarterback situation wasn't great this past year either.
What about Mike Evans?
So, Mike Evans seemed to waffle a little bit as to what he wanted to do with his future. And you know what they always say about guys who think about that? Maybe the fire isn't burning as bright as it needs to be.
He's clearly towards the end of his career.
He's a Hall of Famer, is what he is.
He's easily a Hall of Famer. I think he's still got there's still gas left in the tank there. I don't think he's done, but it's clear, he's nearing the end. But that doesn't mean he can't step in and be a very productive receiver for any team. It's just, you spend that much of your career with one team. Yeah. You're going to go maybe spend your last year, maybe 2 years with another team.
Well, the other issue is how much is he going to cost you?
No, I think
and
he will cost too much for the Giants.
That's the other problem.
Unfortunately, that's like the pipe dream.
Yeah,
I would love
that's
to
the
add
other
him,
problem.
but
You need to find bargains. Yeah. You need to find guys with a red tag sale on them.
And I don't think he's taken a cheap deal just to go sign somewhere. I think he wants to get paid in his last year or two.
I don't see that. So anyway,
would be nice though.
But those are just a couple of names that might interest Team X if they're looking to perhaps get a bargain on a veteran wide receiver. We go to Jason in New Haven. You're next on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Hello.
Hey, Paul and Matt, how you guys doing?
What's up?
Good. How are you, Jason?
Good. A few quick points, and I'll get off the air because I know you guys are coming to an end. The first overall point, I think this, I heard over the last few weeks, well, this draft isn't as good as, this year or that past year. And I don't, I'm not saying you guys have said it, but it's the narrative that's out there. I don't know, man. This draft looks pretty deep at some pretty interesting positions. While it may not have the names of the quarterbacks, and I think that's probably why people say this is not a strong quote-unquote draft, because you don't have the top QB outside of Mendoza. We'll see how the other QBs fare. But I think there's some really good talent in this draft. So the 2 quick points. I don't know, Paul, you brought up the defense, and this is all subjective. Nobody really knows.
Sure.
But my opinion is, man, I think our offense needs way more work than our defense. I don't think our defense struggled last year. That's not to be argued. But I think really part of it, and I said it last year, I think part of that too was the scheme and the coaching. And when Bullen took over, and I'm not trying to knock the previous defense coordinator, but what I'm saying is the defense looks way, way better. Now people say, well, we played the Raiders and the Dallas and the blah, blah, blah. But you still have to play who's in front of you, right?
Yep.
So my issue with the offense is Wandale is a pending free agent. While I'm a big Slayton fan, he was a big disappointment for me this past year. I mean, just a big disappointment with some of these back-breaking drops. We have a running back coming off a pretty severe leg injury, another receiver coming back from a pretty big knee surgery. So I think our offense needs some work, man. I think we have some bones with our defense, and with the first caller was saying sprinkling in a few players, I don't think we're far off, and that's why I keep coming back to Tate. A lot of people will say, well, he ran a 4.5. I don't care about that. When you watch him on the screen, his ability to set up his routes, his catching are top tier. And I will continue to bet. Now, if Styles or Reese are there, then you kind of keep me in a what do I do scenario, and I'll probably go with Reese or Styles. But man, I really think Tate should be the pick. If we're really serious on trying to figure out if Dart is the guy, in my opinion, we need to put some talent around him and not just rely on Malik, who's coming off of he had like 3 ligaments torn in that knee, according to reports. I'm not saying yeah or nay, I'm not the doctor, but according to reports, he had a pretty big knee injury that he sustained last year. So, man, if Tate is there, and like I said before, if whoever they take, I'm going to support 100%. But we need some players on the offensive side. Last point, and I just want you guys' answer. I'll take it off the air. If everybody's screaming, and I talked to Paul about it last week, Matt, or 2 weeks ago. So, Paul, you probably heard this before, but from Matt, I'm just not a big taking downs at 5, man. I just taking a safety at 5 to me is a major, major, major risk. And if positional value not a thing in this draft, if we're so big on downs, why would we not take Love at 5, who, from what I'm hearing, is probably one of the best or better players in this draft? So if positional value is to be thrown out the window for this 2026 draft, if people are so comfortable with taking a safety, how would you feel if the Giants took Love at 5? And I'll take it off the air, fellas. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jason.
I've already addressed this. I'm not a big positional value guy anyway. I factor too many other things into my equations. I mean, I'm going to give you a shot to respond to this one.
I want to just hear what you had said.
Well, I was all about Tate for about 5 weeks with my preliminary feeling because I think he will be there, and I was like, that'd be great. After the last week, I did about 30 players on film a week ago, and then we did the combine and had a lot of intel. I made a lot of phone calls, had a lot of text messages, and talked to a lot of people. And as I always say, when I come out of the combine, I have a pretty solid idea of who I would want at 5 or whatever the Giants are picking. And I'm on Caleb Downs right now. But you know what? If they take Downs or Tate or Styles, I'll be frank with you. I'm throwing a pizza party. I'm good with any of those 3 guys. I honestly don't care. Any one of those 3 guys, it would make me extremely happy.
I wanted to hear your take on what Jason was saying about Jeremiah Love at 5.
I think Jeremiah Love is terrific. I just don't think he's I don't think he's Saquon Barkley. And for me, I was all behind Barkley because I saw Barkley as a very talented, explosive, impactful, gold jacket guy I'm not sure that I look at Jeremiah Love as a gold jacket guy. Do I think he's by far the best running back in this draft and one of the top 10 players talent-wise in this draft? Yes, I do. I absolutely do. But I don't think he is Saquon Barkley. I don't. And so, no, he would not be on my decision board at 5. And furthermore, I do believe that the need component does factor in to the equation. However big a percentage you want to make it, it is part of the equation for me. I don't ignore it. And the Giants, as far as I'm concerned, have 2 very good running backs that should be pretty good for several years to come. So, no, Love is not on my board as a consideration at 5.
All right, I agree with you on that. I think Jeremiah Love is a phenomenal prospect. And as you said, easily the top, I would say, offensive playmaker. I would put him in
He's really
terms of pure talent. He's better than any of the wide receivers in this draft.
Yes.
But I agree with you in that at the 5th pick, when you have, even though he's coming off an injury, you have Cam Scadaboo, you have Tyrone Tracy. It's different from last year when we were having this conversation about whether or not Giants should take Abdul Carter at 3 when they already had Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau, because as we saw this past year, you can get 3 edge rushers on the field together for a lot of snaps. Maybe not every single snap, but a good number. You can't get 3 running backs on the field, even 2 running backs on the field for a majority of your snaps. There's just offenses in the NFL these days just don't operate like that. So I'm with you in that I personally, and it's not in terms of the positional value argument that some people will make about a running back at 5. I'm throwing that out the window here because taking a safety at 5, taking a running back at 5 in terms of positional value, or a middle linebacker for that matter, basically they're all the same when it comes to positional value there. So it's not about that part. It's about, I just think there are bigger needs right now for the Giants, on March 2nd than a running back. And I think that, whether it's Caleb Downs, who I think would just be the type of guy that could transform your secondary, or Sonny Styles, who I think would be immediately step in and be the quarterback of your defense. I think those guys would just be bigger impact players at positions that are more of a need than what I would consider running back right now for the Giants.
And don't forget, John Harbaugh has usually had star safeties when he was with Baltimore. And we already know, at least I've talked to enough of people who know Denard Wilson like the back of their hand, he loves running a 3 safety package. Well, when the new defensive coordinator has a favorite scheme and it's a 3 safety package with a little more heavy blitzing than what he showed at Tennessee because he didn't think he had the tools to run his favorite scheme, well, guess what? Caleb Downs does happen to fit that a whole lot better than any of these other players.
Yeah, and there's been all this talk about, look at John Harbaugh's history with the safety position, which no doubt it's there. You can go through the list of the phenomenal safeties that he coached. But what I have not seen nearly as often is the same argument, but for middle linebacker.
Oh, yeah, he's had terrific linebackers,
He had Ray
too.
Lewis. He had C.J. Mosley. He had Roquan Smith, Patrick Queen. Go down the list. So that's why, Sonny Styles at 5, I think is, at least as of now, so firmly in play because of this. The same argument you could make about his history with safeties goes for the linebackers as well.
That's why it's a no-lose.
Yeah.
If Downs and Styles are both on the board at 5 for the Giants, you throw the biggest pizza party this side of Napoli, okay? Because you take either guy, it's a win.
I mean, I've been saying this to Dan upstairs, not only just to appease him, but honestly, any of those Ohio State players at 5, I'd be, at the very least, totally fine with, if not thrilled. Varying levels, but any of those 4 guys at 5, I think would just be great value, and you're getting one of the best players in the draft.
It's ridiculous. They're a factory right now.
The
really guys they're churning out. You can't go wrong with any of them.
Yeah. I don't even at 5, I think at least 2 of them will already be gone, if not more.
Yes. 201-939-4513. Got to read a quick promo here. It regards Rutgers. Special Olympics, New Jersey's annual Snowball is heading to Rutgers SHI Stadium in 2026. This annual flag football tournament will be on the field from the 6th through the 8th. The 6-on-6 tournament will feature competitive, recreational, and co-ed divisions, and all proceeds benefit thousands of Special Olympics New Jersey athletes across the Garden State. Register your team today at NewJerseySnowball.org. That's NJSnowball.org. Okay, before we get to the calls, one more item. All the stuff that we did during Combine Week, whether it was Big Blue Kickoff Live and all of the different interviews that we had via remote, there were a slew of them. There were also a bunch of huddles that we did as well. They are all up. Most of that stuff is probably still got some shelf life because, after all, the Combines, those tests won't change till the pro days. Now, when some of these guys do their pro days, they may enhance some of their testing numbers, and that may alter some opinions a little bit. But that stuff is all there. It's up on the archive at Giants.com and, of course, all of your other platforms. We go back to the phones, and we've got Coach Marvin in Delaware. Hello, Coach. How are you?
I'm doing good. How you doing, Matt and Paul?
Very good. Thank you.
Nice to hear from you, Coach.
That's good. So I'm going to move a little quick here. It was the week of not this past weekend, the weekend before last weekend. I was invited to a flag football tournament that a lot of states are coming into by referee Ron Kinslow and the college referee Mac Lomack. They invited me there, and I went. You don't believe who I run into. I run into Torrey Smith of the Ravens. I got an opportunity to talk to him. I had an opportunity to mention, obviously I was wearing Giant gear, to talk to him about Harbaugh, and he gave a little bit of insight. Nothing too much more than what we already know. He talked about the leadership that he loves, the leadership that Harbaugh brings to a team. He had a little concern about the coaching staff that has been hired, but he threw in also that he's not over worried because he believed that Harbaugh would lead those guys also. So the fans out there that's concerned about it, that's coming from somebody that was on the inside that locker room. So it was enjoyable to meet him and his teams. So I enjoyed it. Last Saturday, I was on the podcast Faith in Sport by the Rev and his co-host is Ryan, and we did a mock draft. Obviously, I told you about this story. He's a Cowboy fan. Ryan is a Eagle fan, and they brought me in as a Giant fan.
Okay.
And then they had a guest as a Washington Commanders fan. And so my turn came up, and me and Paul, we're on the same page. There's going to be about 5 guys there at that 5th spot. The 5th spot's going to be, I think, the key spot in the whole draft. And we're going to be able to get whatever we want. Because we still haven't even talked about the 2 offensive linemen. So I'm not sure if that's where we want to pick them at 5, but they're there.
I think that'd be a push, Coach, to be frank with you. I think that would be taking the potential needs of the offensive line right now because, again, we don't know what's going to happen in free agency. But I think you'd be pushing those guys from, what are they? Probably value-wise around 15-ish.
I was going to say
yes,
10
I
to
think
10
it
to
was
15.
in that 15 range.
Yeah,
yes.
to me, to push either one of them into the top 5 is a reach.
I agree. That's why they weren't one of my choices in the podcast on Saturday. The Sonny Styles knocked my socks off. That because what he did matches his film. That's what makes it tough now. We don't know what we're going to do in free agency, so that's going to be telling. Almost tell us where we're going to go. If they have an issue with the linebacker, if they release linebackers, he could be the pick. Still, I pick Caleb Downs because of how his versatility, his leadership. I just love the player, but that doesn't take anything from Sonny. That doesn't take anything from Tate. Even though Tate I'm more of a Jordan Tyson person. On his injuries is what concerns me.
Okay.
But we all know OBJ. Everybody loved OBJ, and everybody would want an OBJ. And I just thinking about, how about we bring in OCJ, Omar Cooper Jr. I watched this film. This guy is electric. When he's running his routes, he sticks that foot into the ground and he's separating. He's running plays on the backfield as far as reverses are going. He's taking short passes and taking them the distance. He's breaking tackles, and he's beating guys downfield. I think Omar Cooper Jr. needs to get a real serious look if he falls into that second round. I've been watching since this weekend. Now I'm starting to see his name more at the bottom of the first round. But before this weekend, I didn't see his name at all in the first round. And so I'm wondering if he could drop in the second round. But
I think he could be in that neighborhood, Coach.
You were talking, Paul, about taking two defensive players. I wouldn't mind that, and that's Lee Hunter would be the other one with down. So I kind of agree with everything you guys were saying today. So I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in.
All right, Coach. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Coach.
201-939-4513. Go ahead.
I will say just about Omar Cooper Jr., I noted this last week, and I said this to John. It was interesting because Daniel Jeremiah released his initial top 50 a couple weeks ago. And then about 2 weeks later, maybe 10 days later, released 2.0, updated version. That was the one that came out, I think it was a week ago from today. And Omar Cooper Jr. was not listed in the top 50 in the first ranking. And then in the second ranking, he went all the way up to number 19.
Oh, that's a heck of a jump.
I've been following this list every year since I've worked here. We've been posting it on Giants.com, make photo gallery of it. I cannot remember a guy going from unranked to the top 20 in one go ever before. So I don't know, maybe it was like the first round was just like an oversight. He just kind of forgot about him. I'm not sure, but he's definitely on the radar for sure now.
I think he's in that second grouping of receivers.
He's not the Carnell Tate, Jordan Tyson.
No.
For now, I'll still put Mekhi Lemon there, but he's definitely number 3 in that group. Right now, Omar Cooper for sure is in that next group of guys, which depending on how the first round plays out, depending on what, we say this every year, it's about the flavor because all these different receivers are different body types, different types of receiver. I would say there is a chance he could drop to the early parts of day 2, the early part of second round. It wouldn't surprise me if he goes late first round, though. It's going to be all about what flavor of wide receiver those teams looking to add a playmaker at the end of the first round, what type of receiver that they're looking for. But it wouldn't surprise me either way if he was a late first round pick or if he was there at 37 for the Giants. He is a very interesting wide receiver prospect.
The caller a little bit earlier had said, well, maybe it's not such a bad draft as everybody else is trying to depress some of the talent in this draft. Well, here's what we do know, right? We think at least that when you look at make-it players, I always say a make-it player is a guy who you draft who you really believe he's got a strong shot of getting on your 53. Make-it players. From everything I've been able to ascertain, you're going to get make-it guards probably into the 4th round. You're going to have make-it wide receivers into the 4th round. You probably are going to have make-it tight ends into the 4th round. You may even have make-it defensive tackles into the 4th round. And so, if you're looking for those spots and you're just looking for guys who you have a pretty good feel like, you know what? Yeah, that guy's going to make the team without too much trouble. He's going to make our team, and he's at least going to be a solid backup. Well, that's fine. But here's the thing. Most of the time when people talk about the draft, they're talking about the top 10 to 15 picks, and they want to know, are those impact guys, the best guys in the top 15, are those guys at the premium positions? That's what everybody wants to know. And that's why they'll label a draft a sexy draft. Oh, there's 4 quarterbacks. There's 4 wide receivers in the top 15. There's 4 quarterbacks in the top 15. There were 5 edge rushers in the top 15. That makes people salivate and talk about a draft being a sexy draft. Okay? They're not talking about it being a sexy draft when you have a whole bunch of these 4th rounders who have make it grades at non-premium positions. That doesn't make people call it a sexy draft. But to the caller's point a few minutes ago, it does make the draft perhaps a little bit more than just barren, which there are people who have been kind of downplaying the draft because of the lack of premium position picks up top. I understand that. But to be truthful about it, the good news is if you're the Giants and you want to go get another guard, you want to get a linebacker, even linebackers, they're saying that there are a bunch of make-it linebackers in this draft. Now, they're not premium guys like Sonny Styles, but there are make-it linebackers that you're going to be able to get probably as deep as the 3rd or 4th round.
Yeah, I think something we haven't really discussed, you just touched on it a little bit, is that some of the positions that are considered to be the best in this year's draft, best in terms of number of guys, like the depth of there, kind of matches up at least somewhat with some of the Giants' potential biggest needs.
Yeah.
It's, as you mentioned, wide receiver, linebacker, a little bit of tight end. I know that's not necessarily, depending on how free agency goes, might be a bigger need than not.
Mm-hmm.
What was the other one? I want to say maybe defensive tackle.
Yeah, defensive tackle.
Those positions,
they're make-it guys.
Those are all positions that we expect, whether it's through free agency, draft, or both, the Giants to add guys at those positions. And as you just mentioned, the Giants are going to be able to get guys at some of those positions on day 3 that in a normal draft would be higher than day 3 picks.
Right.
But because of the depth at those positions, they're going to just be forced down, and that's great news for the Giants. Again, that's what happened last year with Cam Scadaboo. I don't think anyone thought from a talent perspective that he should have been a 4th-round pick, but because of how many running backs that were taken last year, what likely would have been a 3rd-round pick got pushed into early day 3, 4th round, and the Giants got lucky and got great value there. And I think that's going to happen again this year at certain positions.
Len, we're over time, but because you're on hold, I'm going to give you 90 seconds. So, Len, you're going to close out the program. Go ahead.
Okay, hard to do in 90 seconds. Well, let me pick a couple of things off my list of things that I wanted to talk to you about. The top 4 guys I had going into the combine, mentioned randomly, not in any order. Mendoza, Bailey, Reese, and Bain. Is Bain still in that top 4, Paul, Matt?
Well, he's not for me.
Okay.
He's
Never was.
He's still in the top 5 conversation for a lot of people. Some people will take him out because of his arm length, but for now, he's still in the conversation at least.
Okay. All right. Let's assume he's still in that top 4. There's a lot of football players left. Man, we're sitting there at 5. I mean, the speed and athleticism this weekend was just off the charts. Just off the charts. Now, the 8, 9, 10 players that are sitting there, who I'm curious about and might eventually draft. I mean, we've got 7 weeks to go. Some of them are not going to fit our need-value quotient.
Right.
But they are going to fit a need-value quotient for the Commanders at 7 and the Cowboys at 11. So let's play a game. It's draft day, 5th pick. We're on the board. The phone rings. It's the Commanders. I'm hanging up. I get off the phone. It's the 9th pick. It's the Chiefs. They want to make a deal. They want the 5th pick. I got an idea who they want. It's Jeremiah Love.
Okay.
I want Kansas City's, I want the 9th pick, obviously. I want a 3, a 5, and a 3 next year.
I have not contemplated that kind of deal, Len, so I'm not going to comment. I don't think it's fair to you to give you a yay or nay.
Okay.
But I will say this. there's not a single solitary soul that I have talked to in the last 2 weeks that believes that you're going to be able to move down or that anybody is going to come up. Now, you have presented an interesting thought because, yes, I'm sure that the Chiefs would very much like to do that, but I think they might want to stay pat and grab an offensive lineman, too.
I will say, I do think Jeremiah Love might be one of the only guys that a team a couple of picks behind the Giants might want to trade up for. There really aren't many guys. He happens to be one of them, and the Chiefs, I think, would be a possibility. Personally, if I'm going down to 9, whether it's this year or next year's draft, I want to get a second-round pick. I don't want 2/3 and a 5th. Give me a second in either year.
Len, we got to run. We'll get you another show.
Thank you. I'll call
be
you
good.
back. Bye.
All right.
Thank you, Len.
Yeah, I understand. I understand your thought. And even John said to me, would you try to move down from 37 a few spots to try to get a third rounder?
Maybe.
Because it's going to be a long way. From 37 to like 105 or 110. It's going to be a long way.
For sure. I'll say this. You don't trade down just to trade down, like just to add another pick. But if someone offers you a fair trade that you move down 5 to 10 picks, whether it's in the first round or the second round, and you can stockpile more of those picks, day 2 and even 2027 picks, that's something you consider. Just very quick, just something else that Len mentioned. You don't just hang up the phone because it's the Commanders calling at 7. I mean, we saw only a couple of years ago when it was the Cowboy or the Eagles at, what was it? Eagles at 10, Giants at 11, Cowboys at 12. The Eagles and Cowboys did a trade that landed one of them Micah Parsons and the other one Devontae Smith.
Right.
You don't just say no just because it's a division rival calling.
You got to pick it up.
If they offer you the best trade package and you only have to move down 2 picks, so the guys that you're considering at 5, more of them will be there at 7.
Yeah.
You got to consider it. You don't just hang up just because it's a division rival.
An archive of this show and our entire podcast network is available on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at giants.com/podcasts. Thanks for joining us from the Giants Podcast Studio, presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. For Matt Citak, I'm Paul Dottino. This has been Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. Take care, everybody.